Hello, listeners, and welcome back to 4NPs. This week's shout-outs go to Belle Future NP, who left us a wonderful review on Apple Podcasts, and to another dedicated listener, Lisa Tran. Thank you both so much for your support. We really appreciate you. We'd also like to give a big shout-out to NP Lauren of NPs of Insta, who just completed her first book called Pocket Pass for Nurse Practitioners. It's for nurse practitioner students and also for nurse practitioners. Make sure to check out this great resource.
We are Christina,
Oneida,
Alicia,
Colleen.
Welcome to 4NPs Podcast.
This is a podcast by 4NPs. 4NPs, advanced practice nurses, students, and anyone interested in the medical arts.
That's the number 4 NPS podcast.
If you have a topic you'd like to see covered, please feel free to email us at 4npspodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us through our social media. This week's 4NPs had the privilege of speaking with the inspiring Diane Volk. Diane comes with 25 years of experience, from her humble beginnings as a nurse in the New York prison system of Sing Sing to her vast experiences at Westchester Medical Center in New York. She's worked in the ED and their helicopter program as a flight nurse, to her current role as a nurse practitioner in the kidney transplant program at Westchester Medical Center. She is someone who has set high aspirations and goals, worked hard, and has achieved them. Diane so graciously shared her inspiring journey that included her challenges, mentors, and support systems along the way. Listen and be inspired.
Hi there. Welcome back to our podcast. Today we have Diane. She is an NP with an amazing background of experience. And so, Diane, welcome to our show.
Welcome.
welcome. Thank you.
Can you tell us just a little bit about your journey with nursing, kind of what made you become a nurse and where have you come from and what have you done along the way?
Oh, I've had a wonderful journey in nursing. I always tell people in my life that it's been a great profession, a great career. I encourage people to go into it. Truthfully, I went into nursing because I wanted to be self-sufficient and be able to, I was either going to become an accountant or a nurse. And my mother said to me, Diane, you're not the kind of person to be behind a desk. You are a people person. That's the career for you. So, and I knew it would be a career that I could sustain myself financially. So that's what my motivation was. I went to Plattsburgh. I wanted to do a 4-year degree when I first started. And while I was in Plattsburgh, I didn't really have the finances to pay for school. So I took a scholarship with New York State to work for them for 3 years. When I graduated, I went to NYU, started my career at NYU. And then New York State knocked on my door and said, okay, you need to come and do the work for us. So from there, I went to Sing Sing Prison and worked at Sing Sing Prison for 3 years as a nurse, as a very young nurse. And then when I finished my 3 years at Sing Sing Prison, I went cross country for 3 months with my now husband of almost 30 years. We figured if we could be in a van together for 3 months, we could get married. I came back from there and I really kind of didn't want to go back into the city, but I really liked a teaching hospital. So that's how I landed at Westchester Medical Center. I took a job in the emergency room under Kathy Cullen, who has been a great mentor and leader for me. At the time, I was volunteering in an ambulance corps. So I really loved being in the emergency room. And I didn't know that the openings in the emergency room came because a lot of those nurses in the emergency room went on to the helicopter program. When I realized that and I was working in the emergency room, I was like, that's what I would really like to do, to blend those things together. And Kathy Cullen left the emergency room a couple of years later and became the head nurse of the flight team. She knew that that was something that I wanted to do, so she recruited me to the flight team. And then I actually stayed on there for 25 years. I saw a lot of my colleagues go on to be into NPs. They became administrators in other places. And I kind of was like, I'm just happy here. I really enjoy what I'm doing. I like what I'm doing. And then I went on a mission trip to Haiti. And at that time, that was my motivation to become a nurse practitioner. I came back from that mission trip and I applied to Mount St. Mary. Jill Brennan Cook was somebody I worked with in the emergency room, and she helped me along that to just start my NP. Took me a long time because I went part-time. My children were young and I wanted that life balance, which I listened to your podcast recently about, and graduated from there as an NP. Continued my part-time. I was working part-time at Westchester as in the stat team, but then took a position as a primary care as a nurse practitioner, added on to that doing like DOT and fire department physicals. So I was working 3 jobs, but I was loving it and having a great time learning about being a nurse practitioner, getting good experience, still loving what I was doing at Westchester. And then a job opened up at Westchester full-time as an NP, and that's when I switched over to that.
And do you miss the flight nurse?
I did it for 25 years. It was a great career. I loved that job. It's probably one of the best jobs I had. I still am very close to a lot of the nurses that I worked on the helicopter with, but I was ready to make a change. It was time.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How did you handle the immense stress that you must have been experiencing as a flight nurse?
As we were kind of talking before, it's very much my personality that I'm the kind of person who goes into a conflict, and the conflict will be really intense, but I'll be that soft-spoken person who can bring that conflict down to another level. So it's kind of who I've always been. Even during when I was in college, I was a rape crisis counselor. I always volunteered with things like that. So it's just me, my personality. So you come in with different eyes when you're coming into that real intensity, and you're seeing it with different eyes. And I really had the skill set to be able to do that. We got a lot of training as helicopter nurses, as flight nurses. So I had that behind me. So where you really had the confidence in what you were doing. We were trained in neonatal, pediatric, high risk OB, trauma, cardiac. So, and we would have annual updates. We had criteria that we needed to meet every month or quarterly in order to be able to stay within the parameters that we had to reach. So, and we had really good support. We went to conferences together. We had a really good medical director, and we were always teaching each other. So I think that was a big part of it, is having the background and feeling comfortable with what you were doing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, truly.
It's such an important component, just having the support. We talk about that a lot on our podcast.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a time in your life when you didn't feel supported in one of your nursing roles?
That I didn't feel supported. I think in different times during your career, there are times that sometimes maybe the administrative role takes a higher priority in the organization than what's needed at the level of the person who's taking care of the patients. And in harder times, sometimes you don't feel like you always get what you need,
Yeah.
Very true. And what do you do as your role as a nurse practitioner at Westchester?
So now when I left the flight team, I took a position in the kidney transplant program, totally different than anything I've ever done before. And actually the nurse practitioner that I took over her, she was retiring. Great nurse practitioner, had a great career. She had her time in, she was ready to leave. She gave me everything that she could to support me. We also had another nurse practitioner who was going to be coming on. So not that I didn't feel supported at that time, but I was left in that role pretty early. So they gave me the tools, but it takes time to learn a new thing like that. So I work in the outpatient department, post-kidney transplant patients. So when they're discharged from the hospital, they come to see us very early in their transplant. We see them very often, like twice a week when they're first transplanted. And then we, kind of transition them a little less and a little less as they're seeing us more. We follow up with them at home. We do prescriptions for them, make sure they're supported, fill their pill boxes, do teaching with them. The other part of my is I do a little bit of the pre-side of the transplants, but really patients that have already been transplanted mostly, and that now that graft has failed for some reason. Could just be time. It could be that they had some kind of problem, and now they're being relisted. So they're kind of people I already know. So I will relist them for transplant and work them through that process again. They kind of know the process already because they've been through it. So I do the pre-side of it in that way. I also do on call, which is very interesting because we cover liver and kidney transplants, but it's really hard because we get called a lot. They changed the way that they allocate kidney and liver transplants. I'd say kidney was about 6 months ago. Liver is just over a year ago. It used to be by region, and now it's by nautical miles, which has increased the amount of offers that we get tremendously. I just was on call last Thursday, and you take call at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you give it up 24 hours later. And it was also a holiday, which was half opened with the office. So we were very, very, very busy. So it's really interesting. It's wonderful to be able to bring somebody in and set them up for their transplant, see them get their transplant, and then see them post after. But that part is really hard.
Do you by any chance work in the ACP building on the 3rd floor?
Yes, I do.
Oh, I work there too. That's so funny. I work right next door to you guys. That's so funny.
Are you a GI?
Yes, I'm in GI.
Okay,
That's really funny. And I hear all the time, like the phone calls with the, it's so amazing to hear, like, you get the calls, you have a organ. It's just interesting. Very interesting what you do.
Yeah.
That's funny.
It's very detailed too with it. And it really is. There's something, calling somebody up and telling them, I have an organ for you that we think is good for you. And the reactions that you get, they've been waiting a long time.
Yeah.
I've just had people cry and their family cry. And I have a patient right now that I called her in for her organ, and this is not her first organ. And she was just elated because she was very hard to match because she has a very high PRA, which means she has a lot of antibodies. But we matched her, and she's doing beautifully. So it's very rewarding.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So cool. Yeah, it must be so rewarding to be able to do that. I hear like the phone calls for the the doctors or the nurses getting the calls for this patient was involved in a motor vehicle accident, and that's the sad part. But then I hear the other conversations with them telling the patient that they have an organ for them, which is it's great.
Yeah. So something good coming at it. And I have to tell you, the majority of people that are donors are drug overdoses. It's so sad. And young, older, middle-aged, a lot of overdoses. And then you get some very sad, a lot of suicides that we see, that you hear about. But like you said, there's something good coming out of tragedy. So
Right.
So Diane, how do you balance your time with work and, family and your other obligations? And
so it was really interesting because I was listening to your podcast about that. And I have to say earlier in my career, it was much easier for me because I worked on the stat team and we worked 12-hour shifts. And when I had my second child, I went part-time. So part-time with a 12-hour shifts is 6 shifts a month. I was the Girl Scout leader. I was at all their sporting events, and I still was working. I had the best of both worlds. I went to be a yoga teacher during that. I was teaching yoga at my church. The best of both worlds. But since I have gone full time now in my career, I'm like, where's that balance? It's been a little harder, and especially with this call has made it very, much harder. So I'm really trying to get back to that, and take that time. Sometimes I actually wake up very early, do some meditation before church. I do meditate in church, but before I go to work, I'll do something like that, which just puts me in the right mind frame for what I'm going into and being able to handle that in a better way. Taking walks, spending time with the family. And really being able to, like this past week, my mother fell and was hospitalized and is in rehab. Being able to say no to some obligations that I had that I was in charge of. And I was like, I can't do it. And the people that were around me were like, absolutely, of course you can. We got it.
That's great.
That's awesome.
So being able to talk to friends, people that are close to you, and being able to tell them the truth of where you are and what's going on with you is really important, because we as nurses tend to just like, I can do it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So true. So true. So your support system with the doctors and your staff, you all work together pretty well?
Yeah, I have to say, Dr. Glicklick is the transplant nephrologist. He heads the program as the transplant nephrologist. Then we have the surgeons. He's a tough cookie. People sometimes will say he's really tough to work with, but I don't find that, because his bottom line is the best thing for the patient.
Right.
And he will always support you, always support what you're doing. If he doesn't quite agree with what you're doing or did, he'll teach you. He'll tell you why he would do it or not do that, but he doesn't second guess you. But he makes you work at a higher level. So definitely feel supported by him.
Good. That's the best.
Yeah. Is there specific training to work as a kidney transplant NP? Is there a specific certification or an organization involved around that?
There is. When I went into, Colleen, you always got to be prepared. I didn't know the language. I didn't know what they were talking about. I was like, let me look this up. So I went onto the websites and I took a course, in transplant, paid for it, because I was like, I need to, have that. It wasn't specifically a nurse practitioner. It was more about, getting your certification in transplant. There is a very specific certification for transplant. I didn't do that right away. I just took a basic course about transplant so I could know the language. And then once I had been there for a little while, I did take a specific certification on transplant. Yeah.
And did they let you ease into that, or did they kind of pile patients on your plate?
No, they let you ease into it. As I said, Dr. Glicklick's very supportive, and we really kind of run it as a team. Liver runs a little bit different than the kidney program does. The liver team, really, the post-transplant patients are assigned to a specific nurse practitioner. With the kidney team, it's 2 nurse practitioners and 2 transplant nephrologists, and we see them as a team. So the transplant nephrologist will see the first post-op visit in the clinic, and then anybody can see them. But they're always available if I have a question to bring them in. So they come into the clinic, and whoever's available, they see. And then at the end of the day, we always review all those patients and where do we want to go? What do we want to do? Do we want to change there? So we really work as a team there.
That's so great to hear that.
How many patients do you usually end up seeing on an average day?
Me, probably 6 to 8. So it's we run the clinic in the morning from 8 o'clock in the morning till like 11 or 12.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a whole new world, transplant. And I've loved it, but just finding that balance for it is hard.
Definitely.
I think also with being a nurse practitioner, the fact that I, right out of school, went in and got something, even though I still had my job as a nurse, started as the nurse, as part-time in primary care, which gave me a great background, the primary care. And I really loved primary care. I would go back into that in a second. It helped me to get the job that I got, because I had some experience, where sometimes there's a lot of nurses there's so many nurses that are in the hospital that got their nurse practitioner but have no experience. It's harder for them to get in, especially in the hospital, and get a job as a nurse practitioner.
Right. And when you first started as a nurse practitioner, what was that like for you? How challenging was it? Did you have any mentors that could help you? How did that?
Oh, absolutely. So I started in Hudson Valley Primary Care, which is actually my doctor's office, he does adults and he does pediatrics. And I found him because he was the pediatrician that I was looking for, a small family practice. And he was board certified in adults and pediatrics. That told me so much about him right there. So my family has always gone to him. And so I went for my regular physical, and there was one nurse practitioner that I've known for a long time, and there was another one that was working there. We were talking, and she's like, "Where are you doing your clinical?" And I was like, I haven't found it yet. And she said, "Why not here?" I said, "Well, I'm a patient. I didn't know if that was okay." And she was like, "I will talk to him." So she talked to Dr. Foster, and he was like, "Of course, Diane, I've known you your whole, for so long. Of course I would take you on as a student." So they took me on as a student, and and while I was there, Anne Marie had to move back to Rockland County, and that position opened up, and he asked me if I would be interested in doing that.
Wow.
So there was two full-time doctors there and 2 part-time nurse practitioners, and nothing but supportive. And the nurses were so supportive. So I learned a lot there. I didn't really have a heavy load there because I was only there 2 days a week. Wednesdays I worked from, I think it was 12 to 8. I covered the evening shift, and then Thursdays from like 9 to 5. So it's hard if you're only there for 2 days to build your own practice, right? Because you can't say, well, Colleen, you're going to come see me, but you can only come on a Wednesday or a Thursday, right? And we had these other hours for other people to be able to come. But I saw a lot of the sick calls too. We always kept positions open so that if somebody called and their child was sick or they were sick, there was always openings for them. It was great that we were open till 8 because then people could come after work. So I filled that kind of role for them, and I was nothing but supported with the doctors there and the nurses. So, and Amy Kelly is the other nurse practitioner that works there. Just such a wealth of knowledge and very, very, very supportive.
That's so great. I find it hard to find a part-time job. I mean, I don't have anywhere near your clinical background at all, but I was really struggling to get any sort of a job.
Yeah.
And I really wanted part-time. So now I just work per diem, but I haven't done a whole lot with it. They're still trying to get set up in New York State, but I haven't had a lot of luck.
Colleen, I think you're right. I think I fell into it, right? Because of just the way that the things had happened. And I think the part-time people come from people that they've already been working there and now they want to go part-time.
Yeah.
And they know you. So it's harder to bring somebody on part-time and put the training into somebody.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. It's a matter of the training too. Yeah. Anyway, you're so inspirational to me, Diane, and you always were. And one of the things I had met early on in nursing school, before I met you also, but I met a lot of nurses along the way that had these careers that talked about doing really different things and kind of, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I just love that about nursing. And I love it even more that as a nurse practitioner, that is still very true. So it's great to see the path that you've taken. And I think it'll inspire some of the listeners. I know we have one listener out there, at least one, whose daughter is interested in nursing school. And she said that she listens to our podcast for her daughter because she wants to be able to support her daughter. And so I hope she's listening and she hears some of the awesome directions that her daughter could go. Did you have any difficulty transitioning from, in your mind, basically, from an RN to an NP? Like, was that easy for you to do, or did you struggle with the new role?
In some ways, it was easy for me because as a flight nurse, we were very, very independent, so it was just me and my paramedic, and we went into a hospital or onto a scene and we treated the patients, and it was us. Sometimes I would call back for orders, but I was calling back and saying, this is what I see. This is what I want to do. Do you agree with what I'm doing? So I think that sets you up for being independent. In the primary care, I had it. It was little, I remember first, I don't know how long I was there, and the doctor came to me and said, Diane, the patient said that you're not really getting back to them with your labs. I was like, I didn't know I was supposed to. It was fine. So like, no, you have to see them and send them their labs, send them a letter that they're okay. I was like, okay, I'll do that. So the fine details of some of the stuff and writing prescriptions, and I really came in, we were just transitioning out of scripts that you had to write, and everything was going e-script, so it was just going into that transition. So there were some of the details of things that were a little hard, but that was where I had really had people that were willing to teach, and the nurses there in the primary care too were just so good. I remember ordering labs that were just wrong, like the D25, and I would order it the wrong way. And she'd be like, don't worry, I'll cancel it and I'll order the right one. Yeah. They would always, you had good nurses, like we all know, that followed you, that helped you to become a better nurse practitioner. And I have to say, like, I say I love nurses and I love nursing students. When I see nursing students in the hospital, I'm always stopping them. You nursing students, I'm so glad. This is a great career. Do it. You can do it. It's okay. Yes. I know it's hard. And when I was teaching, I would always say that to them, you should never feel stuck in your nursing career, because there's so many options that if you are not happy with what you're doing, look around. There are so many options for nursing. And sometimes people get to a point in their career, they don't really want to deal with people anymore. But you could go work for a pharmaceutical company, or for, that equipment that you use all the time. You could do research, so you have to find the thing that you're passionate about and that you like and that you want to do. And I think that it can be a career for the rest of your life. Don't ever feel stuck. Don't stay in something that you're really that unhappy with.
Yeah. And there's like really no reason to quit, because there's so, like you said, so many different options. Yeah. Like it's amazing.
It's limitless.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. I feel sorry for some of these nurses. My daughter is 24 and she had some friends, but she just finished, her friends finished like 2 years before her because she had gotten her doctorate because she's doing physical therapy. And they started right during the COVID. That was, I was like, what a tough time to be starting as a nurse.
Yeah.
And, but getting through that, they can get through anything now.
Absolutely.
For sure. Right. When the whole world is shaken up by things, and everything looks different than what you thought it might look like.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you had a good base education for your NP, or do you think there's something lacking in the education for NPs?
I think that what was really difficult was clinical placement was one of the biggest things. Finding, especially OB, GYN was really, really difficult. It almost got pulled out from underneath us at the very last minute. Very hard to find. I think some of that is that, and there's a lot more PA programs coming into the area.
Right.
And I believe they pay PA preceptors, which they don't do in nursing. So it's harder to get the placement with it. So I think that was one thing that was, I think, really, really difficult.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a course that, well, I'll just give you my personal opinion on it. I think that there's a lot of focus on research in the NP program and not as much of a focus on the clinical pieces of things. The lab interpretation, the radiology interpretation, how to billing, the business of it. There's a whole business administrative level to it. And we're never really taught that. You're kind of just thrown into it. Mm-hmm. So my sense is that I think the programs could use a little bit more of that. Are there any other classes that you think would be beneficial to new nurse practitioners?
I know that they did a roundtable with that, where they brought in some nurses that had their own businesses, right? And kind of showed you different opportunities that there was for, and a very little on billing,
right?
And interpretation of labs. Interpretations of lab is big.
Yeah.
Because there's so much that I feel that I didn't know in the beginning. So I think that's a really big thing.
Yeah. Maybe some more pharmacology.
Yeah.
Also, it's a big part of it.
Absolutely. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Just like the basics, like you said, like, I mean, maybe it's common knowledge, but I did the same thing, like knowing that you should look at the labs and call the patient, and just like the basics of like being a nurse practitioner. That would be, I think, a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good idea, Christina.
Thanks.
Just saying. So anyway, is there anything you would tell your younger self before you became either a nurse or a nurse practitioner? Something that you know now that you would tell yourself that you would have liked to have known back then?
I don't know. I don't really think that way. Because I think that life kind of just like I think I've been open to the opportunities that have been there for me. And I feel that I was led in the directions that I was supposed to go to. And I think there's been hard stops along the way. Things didn't, either though it might sound like, oh, things came easy for me. They didn't, I had to work really hard to get to the things that I wanted to get. When I saw something in the future, like I was like, ooh, I would like to be a flight nurse. There were courses that I took and things that I put myself in a position to be competitive for that. So I don't know if that younger self, I would, I kind of think of life as a journey, and that I'm following that path,
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe I veered off the path and was like, that's not the way you're supposed to go. And I get like steered back in a different direction. And just being open to the opportunities that are around you, because you never know where the next direction that you're going to go. You can think like, oh, I would never do that. But it might be just where you're being called to, so be open to the different things that are around you is what I would say.
Yeah. I love that.
I like that.
Me too.
I wasn't going to be a nurse practitioner. I loved what I was doing. It was being on the side. I was in Haiti on the side of a road with a broken down van with this wonderful woman from Hello Haiti who runs an orphanage, and she always said she wanted to do a clinic there at the orphanage. And I said, I could be of more help if I was a nurse practitioner. And I said, how long will it take you? She said, Diane, it's a developing country. It'll be years. So I said, I have time to go back to school.
And have you been back to Haiti at all?
Yes. So that wasn't, and I've never worked there as a nurse practitioner, been back there many, many times, not now because it's so unsafe.
Right.
And I am still very, very close to the person who runs that orphanage. But I did not think that this was the path I was going on, but somehow that opportunity was open to me. I believe God kind of pushes you in the direction he wants you to go.
I agree.
And that's what happened here. So here I am in kidney transplant, how many years later? And I wouldn't have ever even thought that.
And are you happy that you went back for your nurse practitioner?
I am. I'm happy that I went to school. I love the patients. I've loved being in primary care. I liked doing the physical for the fire department. I really am glad that I did it.
Do you feel like, are you surprised by the amount of opportunity, how many doors are open and how the wide range of things that are open for nurse practitioners? That's something I was surprised by. Just like I felt like so many more opportunities as a nurse practitioner.
Yeah, I think it may be a little bit. I don't think I knew the span of how much nurse practitioners were doing.
Right.
But when I was my original career started at NYU. They were using nurse practitioners in their cardiology program way back then. I mean, I graduated in 1987, and they had electronic recording then too. So I was really surprised.
Wow. That's really ahead of it.
Yeah.
Or when it came to Westchester, way later in my career, I'm like, you don't have electronic? And when you had that, I thought everybody did.
Right.
That's interesting.
So they were using nurse practitioners way back then, and they were just starting to use it when I was on the flight team at Westchester. They was just starting to use nurse practitioners. I had friends that became nurse practitioners. So I think it was surprising to me of how wide open and how many areas that nurse practitioners were being used.
Yeah. This has been an interesting journey for us. We're learning a lot, as we're doing this podcast, just about all the different career options that we had no idea at all, existed. We're hoping that one of the things we do feel, actually, I think we all feel about the education is that it really kind of pushes you towards primary care. It's basically saying you're going to graduate and it's like when you're an RN, you're going to school to be an RN. They're basically pushing you to work in a hospital. That's what you're being trained for. Your clinicals are involved around that.
Right.
Same thing, nurse practitioners, your clinicals are around being in a clinical practice.
Right.
And primary care seems to be the main goal of it all. And so it is surprising when you graduate and you look around and now that my eyes are wide open, I'm finding nurse practitioners everywhere, and it's amazing. It's just amazing the different opportunities available, and we hope to educate nurse practitioners who are just kind of getting started out to that idea. Like, don't feel like you have to go into primary care if you want to. That's great. And there's plenty of wonderful opportunities there as well. But there's a million different directions to go, and you can make your own way. And you have this license, and you can make that license work for you in so many different ways. You don't have to do one thing. You could do 10 things if you want. It's like limitless. So it's very cool. And I love especially hearing your path, because you are one of those people who you don't have a lot of limits. You are very open to opportunity and to all the things that are available to you, and you let things come and accept, that maybe this direction isn't working, so I'm going to go this way because that seems like that's the one that's going to work. And you're optimistic about that, and you embrace it, and you move forward. And that's just so wonderful to hear. So inspiring on so many levels.
Oh, thank you.
Do you have any advice that you would give to nurse practitioner students or new nurse practitioners just starting?
Nurse practitioner students, that you can get through it one step at a time, one day at a time, one course at a time, that you're going for a goal, and you're going to reach that goal and obtain that goal. So sometimes it's hard, and when you're really in the midst of it, to find that balance, but know that you're going to come out on the other end. And it will be something you'll be proud of, and you're going to be better for it. When you start out, I would say that really finding a place that's supportive of a new nurse practitioner. You do hear some stories where people were thrown into things that are probably not the safest, expecting to see a lot of patients in a short amount of time, and not having that time to document and to give to the patients what you need, and not having the support of others around you. So finding that supportive people, which is not always easy, is really important.
It's great. Thank you so much.
Christina, any rapid fire questions?
Oh gosh, I'm not prepared for that. What's on your playlist? I don't know if you do Spotify or Apple. What's on your playlist?
Lately, because I've been having a tough time, it's been Christian music.
That works. That's
good.
But if it's classic vinyls, if it's XM, I like that.
Classic vinyls, good one.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Hallmark movie?
I don't know if I have a favorite Hallmark movie. I know you listen to Hallmark.
I love Hallmark. Somebody just sent me a podcast of these, and I haven't listened to it yet, but it's 3 men who love Hallmark movies.
Oh,
and
really?
I can't wait. I just downloaded it. I'm like, I have to listen to this podcast. I'm going to be their biggest fan. And I'm so mad that I didn't think of it myself.
You're so funny.
Absolutely.
What's your favorite tool or app or, that you utilize for work?
Hippocrates. That's definitely my go-to. In primary care, I also used, the CDC for the vaccines. And I do use that one now too, but that's what I use that a lot. There was also one that I used that had the guidelines and the updated guidelines. I can't remember the name of that.
Was it up to date?
Yeah,
maybe?
I use that a lot in primary care. But Hippocrates is definitely my go-to. I like Medscape.
Yeah, Medscape.
And the hospital actually uses Up to Date, which Up to Date has a lot of really good information. It's not an app, but it's on our computers. And I was really glad to see, even when we went over to the new thing, you could actually get on it right on Cerner, which is a really nice thing. Yeah. Lexicom's on there too, but I don't know. I tend to go to my Hippocrates for some reason.
Good to know.
You are such a calming influence, and it's great. I can tell that you meditate. Like, is that something that you would suggest? I think I might start meditating. I love it. It's like,
I was really surprised in primary care. You learn that people are depressed and there's depression, and you're going to see that in primary care. I was really taken back about how much of it was. So much of my patient population was that. And even if I was seeing them for other things, that was a level that was there. The doctors also tended to send the harder patients, like not harder, but that needed more a little TLC to the nurse practitioners, that they were harder. Yeah. But I have an app that I use for meditation. That was one of the tools that I would give to my patients. For some people that wasn't for them, other people it is. So it was a tool that I used a lot in primary care.
Mm-hmm. What's it called?
Insight Timer.
Inside Timer.
The reason I liked that one is because you don't have to pay for it. So you can pay for it now. That wasn't even an option when I first started using it. And I do because it gives you different levels, but you don't have to pay for it. It's worldwide. There's thousands of apps on it. There's thousands of meditations, and there's ones that are 3 minutes and ones that are an hour, and everything in between. There's all kinds of, there's Christian, Buddhist, no religion. There's if you like meditation, there's something on there you can find for you.
That's great.
That's so great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
we can add that to the show notes too.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Anything you want to plug?
Hello, Haiti.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So that's where you run the mission trips?
Yes. I mean, obviously right now with Haiti in the position that where Haiti is right now, it's not, she's not bringing people down there. She hasn't for the last 2 years. The director, Elizabeth Kennedy, is living in Haiti. And that's been really difficult because of everything between the earthquakes and right now it's so violent. She hasn't been able to bring, but she runs an orphanage down there, which I went to. That's when I first became the nurse practitioner. And then my daughter asked me when she was in high school, said, "Mom, you know that orphanage you didn't bring me to? I want to go now." Oh. And I was like, okay. So we went there for every year after that.
Oh, that's amazing.
Just the last 2 years we haven't gone because of just how violent it is there. But she does a wonderful job with the kids. And some of these kids are now going off to college. And that was always the thing, is educate the children.
Yeah. Does she have a website or?
Mm-hmm. So if you Google hello, it's HELO, only one L.
Okay.
And Haiti.
Right. That's great. We can put that in the show notes also. It's awesome.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say or?
I don't know. I think I've said a lot.
A lot of good information.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Just a lot of inspiration on this episode for sure. It's been so great reconnecting with you again, Diane.
Yes.
I was so impressed with you when I met you years ago, and it hasn't changed. I'm still so impressed and inspired by you. You are one of the nicest, sweetest, kindest people I think I've ever met in my life. And you are also one of the smartest and most amazing nurses I've ever met in my life. So you definitely have been inspiring to me. You have incredible patience. You were very patient with me when I was learning how to teach. And I know we also had a lot of laughs. But
yes.
It's just been so great having you on here. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank you. I was really looking forward to it.
And we'll say some prayers for your mom that she heals fast and is feeling better.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening.
4NP's podcast has a Facebook group called Nurse Business, a community created to support one another and enjoy positive ideas and thoughts. We hope you'll join us. In addition to that, for a little fun, follow us on TikTok.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel to see some clips of our live interviews and listen to past episodes. Feel free to email us with ideas for episodes, comments about our podcast, to recommend an interviewee, or if you'd like to be interviewed yourself at 4npspodcast@gmail.com. That's the number 4npspodcast@gmail.com.
Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 4NP's Podcast. That's the number 4NPS Podcast. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast and go to our website at 4npspodcast.com for episode transcripts, resources, and more information about us.
Please join us next week as we speak with NP Lauren, emergency medicine nurse practitioner, writer, author, mom, and founder of NPs of Insta. You won't want to miss it.
The information in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be used in substitute for professional care by a medical provider. The information in this podcast does not represent medical or other professional advice or services. The thoughts and opinions presented on the 4NPs podcast are of the hosts and guests and do not represent those of their employers.